where we go from here, I mean, there are two aspects. I'll deal with the easy one first, and that is that President Putin is not done in the Ukraine. He's not done putting the squeeze on Europe. And that means that in this winter, it's going to be very, very tough in Europe. It's going to be very tough in this country. You're going to have a combination of lack of fuel and lack of food. And that's not a nice combination in the middle of the winter. It's bad enough now, let alone in winter. So I would see energy prices higher in the winter. And I'd also see food price inflation continuing. And so that's the background against which monetary policy has to be managed. I mean, I'd rather they didn't manage it, but we live in a world where central banks try and manage these things. So that is really what they face. I think that it is going to be incredibly tough. But the second thing is the question as to what value does the average person place on currency relative to goods. And this is a point which was made by Ludwig von Mises, very much against the monetarist approach to the relationship between money and prices. As I'm sure most of your viewers will know, the relationship as far as monetarists are concerned is that if you increase the quantity of money, you decrease its purchasing power. And it should sort of happen maybe with a bit of a time lag, but it is a proportional thing. So if you double the quantity of money, you sort of roughly halve its purchasing power. There is obviously some truth in the relationship between the quantity of money and its purchasing power. But by far the bigger determinant is the use which the public put on that money in terms of its use value. So to give you an example, if they decide to dump the currency completely in return for goods and services, then it becomes completely worthless, despite the changes in the quantity of money which may or may not happen. And I think that at some stage we are likely to see this played out in quite dramatic form. And the reason I say that is that when you get a very severe contraction of bank credit, it inevitably leads to banking failures. It is the job of a central bank to try and ensure that these banking failures do not happen and they do not impact on members of the public. So what you're going to see is the currencies being debauched in order to protect the financial system, if I can put it that way. And I've said this so many times until I'm blue in the face. The prime example of this was John Law in 1720 France, when he printed credit in order to buy shares, support shares in his Mississippi venture. And it got to the stage where it no longer began to work. The shares sank despite that. But what happened was that he destroyed the currency in the process. And we have a similar situation today where the central banks will try and keep the whole of the financial system going, which basically is not just keeping the banks open for business, but also stopping financial assets from sliding in value. And now that's going to require enough money printing to either destroy the currencies through quantity alone, or more likely, destroy the credibility of the fiat currencies that they issue in order to try and support markets. And that, I think, is really where we're going with this.
All right. So if I can just tack on to that, which is if the currency is being debauched, that basically means that the CPI is going up anyways, because it's reflecting the loss of purchasing power. So obviously the consumer, the public, is going to notice that. And if they're in an environment where key essentials like fuel and food are in shorter supply, then you would expect, what we've seen in a lot of other countries, let's just take in Argentina or whatever, where people will just rush out when they get paid to exchange that paper for those key limited supplies, which basically just, continues the cycle of the hyperinflation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's you've got it right, and I think in the South American context, I think we probably see a better example with Venezuela, which has got the greatest oil reserves in the world, and guess what? They've destroyed their currency. I mean, it's you don't need necessarily to be a terribly you don't get protection from being a very well-off country from the destruction of wealth that modern macroeconomics can wreak.
If you enjoyed this video clip, click here to watch another one you should like.